I'm going to tell you about a woman who spent 2 years convincing me I had no place in my own grandmother's home, right up until the morning she tried to sell it and discovered my name was still on the deed. Before I get into it, I want to ask you something. Leave your answer in the comments. What do you think hurts more? A stranger dismissing you, or your own mother looking right through you like you were never really there? This story sat heavy in my chest for a long time before I was ready to tell it. My grandmother, Rosetta, raised us on Marigold Street. Not us exactly. She raised my mother, and my mother raised me and my brother Dwayne in that same house, because it was always just there, always open, always smelling like coffee and whatever she had baking on any given Sunday afternoon. The rooms were small but never felt cramped. The backyard had an old fig tree she planted the same year she bought the property. I know that because she told me the story every summer while we stood on the low branches picking fruit, and she told it the same way every time, like it was the first time, like it still made her proud just to say it out loud. She died 2 years ago, just after her 78th birthday. It was a Thursday in February. I remember the exact moment my phone rang because I was folding laundry, and I just knew, the way you sometimes know before anyone says a word, that everything was about to change. The funeral brought more people than I expected, neighbors who had known her for decades, old friends from her church, cousins I hadn't seen since I was 10. Everyone had a story. Everyone used the same words: generous, steady, strong. For a few hours that Saturday, it felt like the whole world paused to honor the woman who had been holding our family together, without anyone fully realizing it. Then everyone went home. That's when things started to shift. My mother, Maureen, moved into the house on Marigold Street within 3 weeks of the funeral. She said it made more sense than keeping her apartment across town. She said she wanted to be near Grandma's things. She said a lot of things that sounded reasonable when I was still deep in grief and not paying close enough attention. Dwayne visited on weekends. He brought takeout, sat on the couch, watched football, and left by Sunday evening. My mother never asked him to do anything in particular. She never pressed him about the grocery runs or the yard or the water bill. She laughed at his jokes and sent him home with leftovers in containers she'd washed and dried for him. With me, it was different. I don't know how to explain the way a parent can love you and still make you feel like a burden without ever saying it plainly. It happened in small moments. The way she talked about Dwayne's career like she was announcing it at an awards dinner, then mentioned my job. I work as a dental hygienist at a family practice, the same way she might mention the weather. Casually, as filler. The way she'd call and ask me to come by for one thing, and when I arrived, there would be 3 more things waiting that she'd never mentioned. The way she thanked Dwayne for showing up at all, and thanked me for finally showing up. I kept going back anyway, every Sunday for almost a year. About 8 months after my grandmother passed, I was sorting through paperwork at my apartment when I found a letter I had never properly opened. It was from the estate attorney's office. I'd received it in the weeks right after the funeral and set it aside during a stretch of days when everything felt like too much. When I finally read it, I read it twice to make sure I understood it. My grandmother had left a will. The house on Marigold Street had been left jointly, to my mother and to me. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that. Then I called the attorney's office first thing the next morning and scheduled a meeting. The attorney explained it plainly. My grandmother had updated her will 4 years before she passed and had specifically named both of us on the deed. My mother would have received the same letter during probate. She would have sat across from that same attorney and heard the same explanation. She knew. She had always known. I didn't say anything to my mother right away. I found a different attorney first, one who specialized in property and estate law, and spent an hour in her office going through every question I could think of. By the time I left, I understood exactly what my rights were. I understood exactly what my mother could and could not do without my cooperation. Then I went home and kept quiet. A few months later, my mother brought it up herself. We were sitting in Grandma's kitchen, the same worn linoleum floor, the same yellow curtains she'd always meant to replace, and my mother slid a folder across the table toward me. "I need you to sign these," she said. I looked at the papers without touching them. Transfer documents. She wanted me to sign my share of the property over to her, outright, no conditions. "I'm thinking about refinancing," she said. "Making some improvements. It's just easier if everything's in one name." I asked her when she had planned to tell me about the will. She looked at me for a moment. The attorney handles all of that. I know, I said. I've already spoken to one. Something shifted in her expression. She pulled the folder back toward her side of the table. I need you to trust me on this, Jada. I told her I needed time to think about it. That was the beginning of months of pressure. She called every week. She brought it up every time I visited. She framed it as simplification, as practicality, as what Grandma would have wanted. When those didn't work, the tone changed. She told me I was being difficult. She told me I was being selfish. She told me I had never contributed a single dollar to that house, and had no business holding on to something I didn't even take care of. Each time I listened. Each time I drove home and sat in my car for a few minutes before going inside. Each time I did not sign. It was Christmas Eve when everything finally broke open. My mother had the whole family over. Aunts, uncles, cousins, Dwayne with his girlfriend. The house smelled like pine, and Grandma's sweet potato casserole, which my mother had finally learned to make without burning the edges. Everything looked warm from the outside. I brought a bottle of wine and a pie from the bakery, 2 blocks from my apartment. I sat at the far end of the table next to Aunt Sylvia, my mother's oldest sister, who had always been quieter and steadier than anyone else in that room. We were talking about nothing in particular, when my mother stood up to refill a serving dish, and paused behind my chair. Jada. The table went quiet. I had the attorney draw up the papers again. I left them on the counter. I need you to sign before the new year. I set my fork down. Mom, tonight isn't the time. It's never the time with you. Her voice stayed calm, but it was carrying. Everyone could hear. This is my mother's house. I'm the one living here, paying the bills, keeping everything running. You haven't contributed a single dollar to this place. That's not entirely true, I said, just as quietly. You come over when you feel like it and act like that counts for something. She shook her head. I'm done waiting on you. If you're not going to help this family move forward, then this isn't your home anymore. Pack whatever you brought tonight and go. You're not welcome here. The table was completely silent. I looked at her, then I looked down at my plate, then I folded my napkin, set it beside my glass, and stood up. Okay, I said. I got my coat from the closet by the front door. Aunt Sylvia started to rise, but I caught her eye and shook my head, just barely. I picked up my purse. I walked back through the kitchen, picked up the folder of transfer documents from the counter where she'd left them, tucked it under my arm, and walked out the front door. I didn't slam it. I drove 4 miles across town and pulled into the lot of my apartment complex. I had been renting the unit for 14 months. I paid my rent on the 1st of every month with money I earned at the practice. I had repainted the hallway myself and chosen the curtains in the bedroom and put a welcome mat by the door that I liked for no reason other than it made me smile when I came home. I let myself in and stood in the kitchen for a moment. There was a photograph on the refrigerator, held up by a magnet shaped like a sunflower, that Grandma had brought me back from a trip years ago. The photo showed the 2 of us on the back porch the summer I turned 18. She had her arm around my shoulder, and she was laughing at something I'd said. I couldn't remember what it was, but I remembered the sound of it. I pressed my hand flat on the countertop and let the ache settle in for a minute. I had not spent all those Sunday afternoons on Marigold Street because I needed my mother's approval. I had gone back because I kept believing, that eventually she would see me the way Grandma had always seen me. I had held on to that hope the way you hold something that keeps getting lighter until you look down one day and realize your hands are empty. I slept better that night than I had in months. My mother, from what I pieced together later, did not sleep at all. After the guests left, she sat in the living room with the television on and a drink she didn't finish. She told herself I would call before midnight, then she told herself I would call by morning. The phone stayed quiet. By 9 the next morning, she had called a real estate agent. She'd been thinking about listing the house, she told him. She wanted to move quickly, get the property on the market in the new year. The agent came by, walked through the rooms, talked about comparable sales in the neighborhood, and said he would need to run the title before they could go any further. The call came back 2 hours later. There was a problem. The property was not solely in her name. There was a second owner listed in the county records, and no sale could be initiated without a signature from both parties. She called the estate attorney. The estate attorney reminded her, patiently, of what had been explained during probate. Her mother had named 2 beneficiaries on the deed. Both names appeared in the official record. He had explained this to her before, more than once. She called me immediately after. I was at work, in between appointments, when my phone lit up on the counter beside me. I looked at her name and turned the phone face down. She called 4 more times that morning. That afternoon, she called Dwayne. He called me. I let it ring through to voicemail. His message said Mom was stressed and it would be easier for everyone if I just went ahead and signed. I listened to it once and deleted it. That evening I got a text from Aunt Sylvia. She wrote that she didn't know everything that had been going on with the house, but she thought my mother owed me an explanation, and she was proud of me. She said to call when I was ready. I called her that night. We talked for almost 2 hours. Meanwhile, from what Aunt Sylvia later described, my mother spent the next 2 days going through the house. She went through the spare room, the filing cabinet in the hallway, the shelves in the front closet. I don't know exactly what she was hoping to find. Something in the paperwork that superseded the county records, maybe, or just something to do with the panic that had settled in. Eventually, she made her way to my old bedroom. I'd kept a few things there, some books I didn't have room for, a bin of winter coats, and in the back of the closet, in a manila folder tucked inside a shoebox, a collection of papers I had put together over the past 1.5 years. She found it. Inside the folder were copies of the original will, the deed, the estate attorney's first letter, a printout from my own attorney summarizing my rights, with passages highlighted in yellow, and behind all of it, several pages of handwritten notes in my handwriting. She sat on the edge of my old bed and read them. The notes recorded what I had learned and when, the date I found the letter, the date I called the estate office, the date I sat across from my own attorney, the questions I'd asked and the answers I'd written down word for word, and woven in between the legal notes, personal ones. One entry from about 13 months ago. She asked me again to sign today. I said I needed more time. I know I have every right to hold my share indefinitely. I know I could force her to negotiate. I could make this difficult and be completely within my rights to do it. I'm not going to. I just want her to be honest with me. I want her to look at me and see a daughter, not an obstacle. I want her to choose me the way she always chose Dwayne, just once. I keep going back on Sundays thinking that day is going to come. Another entry, written more recently. She called me by my name twice today when she was pleased and said nothing at all when she wasn't. Dwayne got called son every time he walked in the room. I've been tracking it without meaning to. I don't know if she notices. I don't think she does. My mother sat in that room reading those pages for a long time. She called Aunt Sylvia that evening, and Aunt Sylvia came over. Sylvia told me later that she found my mother on the bed, with the papers spread out around her, reading the same pages over and over. She said she didn't know what to say, so she just sat down next to her. My mother said something Aunt Sylvia hadn't expected. She said quietly, "I didn't see it." Not an excuse, just 4 words. 3 days after Christmas, I sat with my attorney and told her what I had decided. She walked me through it carefully and asked me twice if I was sure. When I told her I was, she prepared the paperwork. A quitclaim deed, properly executed, transferring my entire interest in the property on Marigold Street to my mother, with no conditions attached, no payment required, no negotiation, no argument. I signed everything, had it notarized, and slid the papers into an envelope. Then I took out a note card and wrote 1 sentence. It took me longer to write that sentence than it had taken to sign all the legal documents combined. I wrote it 3 times on scratch paper first. When the wording finally felt right, I wrote it on the card. Then I sealed the envelope and arranged for a courier to deliver it to Marigold Street the next morning. My mother answered the door just before 8. She signed for the package and carried it inside to the kitchen table. Grandma's kitchen table, the same one she'd slid folders across for over a year, and she opened it. She recognized the documents before she finished pulling them out. She went through each page slowly, a quitclaim deed, my signature, the notary's stamp, page after page saying the same thing in legal language. The property was hers, fully, permanently, without condition. At the very back of the envelope, she found the note card. 6 words. I didn't want the house, I wanted my mother. She read it, then she read it again. Aunt Sylvia told me what happened next. She said my mother hadn't cried at the funeral the way she cried in that kitchen. I don't know what exactly that means, whether she understood something she should have understood years ago, or whether she was only grieving the thing she'd just now realized she had already lost. I wasn't there to see it, and I didn't call to find out. The deed transferred at the county office 6 days later. The house on Marigold Street belonged entirely to her. She had everything she had spent more than a year trying to extract from me. She sold it 8 months after that, listed it in the fall, accepted an offer quickly, closed before Thanksgiving. She bought a condo about 40 minutes north. She told people it was a fresh start. I hope it was. I mean that genuinely, not because I don't still carry the weight of those Sunday afternoons. All those years of walking through that door and being filed somewhere behind the version of myself she had already decided I was. I carry that. I think I probably always will, at least a little. But I signed that deed because I finally understood something that had taken me too long to see clearly. No legal document was going to give me what I had actually needed from her. No amount of leverage, no negotiated settlement, no forced conversation at a county recorder's office was going to produce a mother who looked at me and saw a daughter she was proud of. The house was just a house. And if I spent the rest of my life using it as a bargaining chip, I was the one who would pay the higher cost. So I'm my sake, not hers. I still live in my apartment. I repainted the kitchen a shade of sage green last spring that I think Grandma would have liked. The sunflower magnet is still on my refrigerator, and the photograph is still behind it. Some mornings I make coffee and stand at the window and think about her. About the fig tree. About Sunday morning light. About the way she said my name like it was something she was glad existed. I don't think about what my mother is doing. Not often. I've thought sometimes that she might call. Not to make a formal apology, but just to say something. To acknowledge that there was a door between us and she watched it close and didn't move to stop it. Maybe she will. Maybe she won't. I've stopped trying to predict it either way. What I know now is that some people spend their whole lives fighting over what they can own. Property, money, the last word, and they win. And then they sit alone in what they've won, and they understand too late that what they actually wanted was never something that could be acquired that way. Some houses are just houses. And some doors, once you walk through them for the last time, don't stay open out of habit anymore. Not out of anger. Not even out of hurt. Just because you finally stopped waiting for someone to meet you on the other side. Before you go, tell me in the comments, have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved because staying was costing you more than you had left to give? And if this story felt familiar, if it reminded you of something you've lived or someone you know, share it. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for each other is just say, I see you, you're not alone in this.